All right, everybody, welcome to PDH Day again. If this is your first session, we certainly hope you enjoy it, and you missed a lot of other good sessions earlier today. And if it's not your first, well, welcome to the last, but certainly not the least session of the day. For those that have been around earlier, you already have heard this, but please go ahead and join our, subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to get more information about these kinds of things in the future. It's GSPE NG, so youtube.com/GSPENG for Georgia Society of Professional Engineers. And on this particular session, this one, for those that have been around earlier, is a little bit different. Go ahead and type in your questions in the comment box as normal, but Tricia will be answering those or handling those along with Rick at the end, so we won't be interrupting their presentation. And then that's about all that I have for the housekeeping. And with that, I'll turn it over to Betty Jean Jordan, our Executive Director for GSPE.
Well, hello again, everybody. I think most of you have probably been with us all day, so you get to hear my spiel here one last time, but I think it's important information. So first of all, thank you and welcome here to our last session. Want to remind you, if you are not a GSPE member, we invite you to join, and you can do that easily by going to NSPE.org. And at the top right-hand corner, you'll see a Join Now button. That's all you have to do is follow those directions. Let's see. Remember to renew your PE license here in Georgia by December 31st. I will be sending out PDH Day certificates early next week. And thank you to all of you that have been sending me messages with each session to let me know that you've attended. And I'll correlate all that and get it out next week. These sessions will be available later at some point, and we'll give information about that when they are available. And lastly, we found that not everybody has a YouTube account, so you have to be logged in to use the chat box, ask questions. Don't worry about creating an account if you don't want to go to that trouble. You can also email me your questions, and I will post them on your behalf if you want to. So, I think that is all I have, and we're really pleased that we have our NSPE President and President-Elect. We have Tricia Hatley, who's our current President, and Rick Guerra is the President-Elect. And so I will now turn it over to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty Jean, and thank you, Steve, and good afternoon to everyone. We're really thrilled to be with you today for your Georgia Society of Professional Engineers PDH Day. Thank you very much for having us. And I just want to reiterate something that Steve said just earlier. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use the YouTube comment box to send them to us. We've reserved some time at the end of the presentation, and hopefully we'll be able to respond to all your questions at that time. Steve, is my screen being shared now? There it is. Okay. Yep. Before we get into the presentation, we thought it would be helpful for us to share a little bit more about ourselves so that you can better understand your presenters and how we relate to this particular topic. And Trish, ladies first, I'm going to let you go first.
All right. Thank you, Rick. Well, I'm Tricia H. I've been an NSPE member since 1993 when I graduated from Oklahoma State, and I'm currently serving as our national president, as Betty Jean said. I live in Oklahoma City, and I oversee my firm's offices here in Oklahoma, where we do planning, design, and construction management of public infrastructure projects. I'm a civil engineer, and with most of my technical background in the area of transportation. And I started with Freese and Nichols, like I said, after I graduated from Oklahoma State University. And while I was attending school there on campus, I worked for the Department of Transportation for a couple of years between classes there. So during my career at Freese and Nichols, I have seen the number of women in engineering and in our industry overall continue to grow. And I've gotten to work with many successful female leaders, both on the client side and within my organization. I've met lots of women engineers who have run their own businesses and been very successful. And so I'm excited about this new emphasis on diversity in our profession, and I'm looking forward to what the future holds for women and others in our area.
And I'm Rick Guerra. As Betty Jean said, I'm the current NSPE President-Elect. Austin, Texas is my home. I am currently the President and CEO of Jose I. Guerra Incorporated. We're a full-service consulting engineering firm with 3 offices in Texas. We provide civil, structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection engineering services to clients throughout the state of Texas. We work primarily in the public sector and almost exclusively with vertical construction. I'm a mechanical engineer by education and training. My experience or expertise is in HVAC, plumbing, and fire protection systems for commercial, industrial, institutional, and healthcare facilities. I've had a very rewarding 38-year engineering career, and all but 4 of those years were spent in private practice. Most importantly for this conversation, as a Hispanic engineer and owner of a consulting engineering firm, I've had a unique perspective on diversity and inclusion in the engineering profession. I've experienced some of the struggles facing minorities in our profession, but I've also experienced the benefits that come from a diverse and inclusive company environment. And that's why I am so interested in this particular topic that we're bringing to you today. We're really excited to visit with you today about ways you can increase diversity in your organization and even in your own personal circles. For most of us, when we hear the word diversity, something immediately pops into our mind. Maybe it's something we've watched, read, or listened to, a conversation we had, maybe even recently. And for some of us, it may also be an experience we've had, maybe a really good experience. But we also know that there are some bad experiences related to this topic. As we explore the concept of diversity together, we ask you to bring all your thoughts and experiences, both good and bad, with you. But we would also ask that you keep an open mind as well, because change is often difficult, but increasing diversity in your organization or even in your own circles requires a great deal of self-reflection, awareness, and education. Maya Angelou once said, I did then what I knew how to do. Now that I know better, I do better. Our hope is that you will leave here today with at least a few nuggets that will help you do better in your personal and professional lives. Our objectives for today are simple. We're going to start by defining diversity, equity, and inclusion. Then next, we'd like to briefly discuss NSPE's strategic focus on diversity. Then we're going to challenge your unconscious bias and perspectives. And then lastly, we want to spend some time identifying some best practices for how organizations and individuals can advance diversity, equity, and inclusion. Since we're going to be talking about increasing diversity in your organization, I'd like to begin by asking each of you a few questions about the current state of diversity within your organization. And by the way, these questions are rhetorical. I don't expect you to answer them, but I would like for you to think about them as I'm reading them. Does your company or organization have a diversity and inclusion strategy that you're aware of? Have you attended any type of diversity training in the past year? And lastly, does your company or organization have a diversity officer or a similar position? Reflecting on these questions and others like it, how would you rate your company when it comes to diversity? The point I'd like to make here is that for any future-focused, proactive organization, diversity is increasingly a strategic imperative. If discussions and initiatives around diversity and inclusion haven't started yet within your organization, you can bet that they will very soon. Let me start with some definitions so we're all on the same page as we work through the presentation. Diversity. This is differences of all kinds, including but not limited to gender, age, education, and physical ability. Many times, it's easiest to focus on differences that we can see, but we're also talking about thoughts, ideas, and perspectives and values when we're talking about diversity. Equity. is the fair treatment, access, opportunity, and advancement for all people, while at the same time striving to identify and eliminate barriers that have prevented the full participation of some groups. Improving equity involves increasing justice and fairness within the procedures and practices of institutions and systems, as well as in the distribution of resources. Tackling equity issues requires an understanding of the root causes of disparities within our society. And inclusion. Inclusion is about creating a climate where differences and similarities are respected and welcomed. Inclusion or belonging is very different from fitting in. Fitting in can require changing yourself, adjusting your values or preferences in order to be accepted. Inclusion or belonging means being accepted for who you are. You can be a diverse company, but not be inclusive. And you can be an inclusive company, but not be diverse. One of the mistakes that I think many companies make is that they try to expand their talent pool and hire diverse candidates, but they miss the opportunities for the inclusion piece. Just because you have a diverse talent pool doesn't mean your company is automatically inclusive. As officers of NSPE, we'd like to take this opportunity to highlight some of the organization's recent actions in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Firstly, we'd like to point out that in July of 2019, diversity gained a place in the NSPE Code of Ethics. Our Code of Ethics now compels engineers to treat all persons with dignity, respect, fairness, and without discrimination. This really leaves no gray area. As members of this important and learned profession, we as engineers must embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion as an ethical obligation. The second quote you see is an excerpt from the written statement of NSPE past President David Martini in early June. The statement was made in response to the social unrest that began with the tragic deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery. The last sentence of his statement challenges us as a profession to look inward as we work to create an environment that is equitable and inclusive for all that would join our ranks. What a great goal this would be for each of us, to first put our own houses in order when trying to bring diversity, equity, and inclusion to our organizations. In July of 2019, NSPE began in earnest to put its house in order with respect to diversity, equity, and inclusion. After an 18-month strategic planning process filled with meetings, collaboration, data gathering, research, and spirited debate, NSPE made promoting diversity in tomorrow's engineer one of the 4 key focus areas of its new strategic plan. To help illustrate how we were feeling at the time we made this decision, let me run you through a hypothetical scenario. And this is from a book titled Upstream by Dan Heath. You and your friend are having a picnic by the side of a river. Suddenly, you hear a shout across the water. A child is drowning. Without thinking, you both dive in, grab the child, and swim to shore. But before you recover, you hear another child crying for help. You and your friend again swing into action to rescue. Then another struggling child drifts into sight. Then another, then yet another. The 2 of you can barely keep up. Suddenly you see your friend wading out of the water, seeming to leave you alone. Where are you going, you ask, to which your friend responds, I'm going upstream to handle the guy who's throwing all these kids in the water. Let me explain. As part of our research and data gathering during the strategic planning process, we took a hard look at the demographic makeup of our members. Looking at our membership by gender, you can see that we are 90% male and only 10% female. There's drowning child number 1. Looking at our membership by ethnicity, we're 83% Caucasian and only 17% representing all other ethnic groups. Drowning child number 2. Looking at our membership by age, a mere 18% are under 40. And almost 2/3 of our members are over 50. There's drowning child number 3. Clearly, these demographics are not reflective of our greater society and don't represent a sustainable future for our organization or the engineering profession. It was time to head upstream to confront the guy throwing all the kids in the water. In choosing to focus its strategic efforts on promoting diversity in tomorrow's engineer, NSPE has committed to improving the profession by advocating for and supporting a climate of diversity and inclusion. Through ongoing and effective partnering, training, programs, and outreach, NSPE will actively work to ensure that the future membership in our organization reflects the ever-changing demographic of our society. Our first step in advancing our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives was to establish a DEI advisory committee. You can see that committee pictured here. The primary purpose of this committee is to advocate for and support a climate of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our organization and in our profession. They advise and consult with the NSPE Board of Directors on strategies and tactics related to DEI, and provide guidance and assistance to volunteers and staff in leveraging the impact of ongoing activities and programs. As you can see here, they had a very busy and productive first year. They worked with staff to update NSPE member profile fields so that we could gather baseline demographic data on our members. And I'll stop briefly to say, if you haven't updated your profile, please do so. They developed DEI questions for our 2020 NSPE Engineering Outlook Survey, which received responses from nearly 3,400 professional engineers, engineering interns, and students. They identified speakers for diversity training, fostered and supported dialogue on diversity and inclusion with our members via the NSPE communities and social media, provided guidance regarding response to ongoing social unrest, including advising President Martini in the statement that you saw earlier. They wrote a feature article and opinion piece titled, "Why Should I Care About Diversity in Engineering?" for the July-August issue of the PE magazine. And they identified opportunities for collaboration with other engineering organizations on DEI initiatives. And I'll tell you that that is a big part of the focus of this committee this year, continuing to identify more opportunities to collaborate with other organizations. We have a lot of work ahead of us in bringing diversity, equity, and inclusion to NSPE and the engineering profession. And we hope that you'll join us in supporting this critical initiative. I'm going to turn it over to Trish now, who's going to talk to you about how bias affects us all.
Okay, so before we get to the real meat of the presentation, talking about best practices, I think it's important for us to have a little self-reflection time and start with a discussion about unconscious bias. So we have a little video here for you. It's a little long, it's a few minutes long, but I think you'll find it very interesting to help kick off our conversation.
I'd like you to play. You're about to meet Michael. He lives fast as a self-made millionaire.
You didn't have to dress up. It's all right.
You're going to photograph Michael. He's actually saved somebody's life. Michael is an ex-inmate. He's a commercial fisherman. Michael claims to be psychic.
Nice to meet you.
Michael's a former alcoholic. Here's your camera. I'd like you to flesh out the essence of who he is.
What would you like out of this? What would you like the photograph to say about you?
I find that being a psychic impacts much on your day-to-day life.
I can see this is emotional for you. Like to get to know the person. You've only got 10 minutes, right?
I think you're a guy that's put yourself out there.
You're not hiding anything. My plan was to find out about whoever it was and to try and get that. And what I learned from him is he's incredibly brave.
It was really intense. Pull his shirt out. Sorry.
I wanted to see the nature of the person, which then present a challenge. How do you portray him as official?
That's perfect. He's a self-made millionaire and sort of a little bit intimidating. I wasn't going for a beautiful, nice, perfectly lit portrait.
I just want to try and bring out something of who you are. I think that you just treat people like the everyday people, like everybody is. Pleasure. Thank you so much.
Well, I hope I've got that guy's bravery on film.
So it was a very intimidating environment.
I like that empty chair next to it too.
Oh, so it's like 6 different people. So not everything I told you today was true. I'm not a fisherman. I am not an alcoholic. The GFC hit me hard, but I've never been a millionaire. Never been in prison. I am a Bondi lifesaver, but the story we talked about never did. Not psychic. Can barely spell it.
Before I knew there were different characters, I thought, that's really strange. These don't look like portraits of the character I thought you were. You always got your own preconceptions and you've got your ideas.
It pushed me into a position and a space that I wouldn't normally be in.
You have to dig a lot deeper. I mean, it's got to be, I think, a lot more creative to work out how you're going to play things.
So that that little video is out on YouTube. It's actually a commercial for Canon cameras, but I think it's a fascinating look. I've seen it probably a dozen times now, and I still find it very interesting. And when you watch that video, were you surprised at how differently the photographers treated the subject, how they handled him and guided him based on who they thought he was? Did it surprise you about how they would lead him into a pose that would make him look the way that they thought he should look, knowing who who they thought he was, and how differently he appeared in those photographs, and based on how the photographer prompted him? And just really interesting and a really great illustration of how our unconscious bias, comes out and how it can be impacted. So we all have unconscious bias, and so to be biased is to be human, and it's not bad. The biases aren't inherently bad. It's more, how we act on those biases that can be good or bad, right? And so these biases, these perceptions that we have, that we bring to the table, are part of our upbringing. It's part of our life experiences. It's comes from the materials we read, the shows we watch on television, the people that we surround ourselves with in our everyday life. And in the workplace, these differences of who we are and where we come from are what we bring to the table. It's where the ideas and the innovation come from. And so they are strengths for us. And so biases are not bad, but it's just part of understanding kind of who we are. So on the next slide, talk a little bit about another kind of issue here is problem blindness. If we don't see a problem, we can't solve it. Of course, we're all problem solvers as engineers, so I think you can kind of understand that. An example of this would be in my office here where I sit, and when today it's cold, so the heater's on, but when the air conditioner comes on, there's this weird little ringing noise that comes out of the vent, and I don't even hear it because I sit here all day every day, and it's just part of the background noise, and I don't hear it. But other people will walk into my office and they'll sit here for a few minutes and then say, what is that weird noise I'm hearing? And so it's like these underlying issues can be something that we grow so accustomed to and so consistent in our lives that we don't even see them. And if we don't see them, and don't understand them, then of course we don't know to look for the root cause and to figure out how to address it. So as leaders, in our lives, in whatever capacity you're in, it's our jobs to detect those problems within our organization, and to look for those and not be blind to them, and then to work with others to find ways to address these issues and measure the success. And doing so in this diversity arena means that we have to pioneer ways to work together to solve these problems. So we're going to go through a couple of case studies to help illustrate some of these points. So this first one is a story about lunch, and this is a story that came from my company. One of the leaders in our company, he's a manager of a group, and he likes to, when he does his annual performance reviews for his employees, he likes to take them out to lunch and celebrate the successes that they've had for the year and kind of show his appreciation for the work that they've done. However, he has a couple of female engineers that work for him, and he has a personal kind of belief and kind of a way that he likes to do business, where he doesn't like to go out to lunch with a woman who's not his wife, alone. And so that's just kind of a personal preference he has. And so one day he was doing a review for one of these young female women that worked for him, and he did a review and said thank you very much, and the review was over, and she didn't get to go to lunch with him like she knows that her coworkers, her male coworkers, get to do. So she called up a friend of ours in HR and was kind of talking to her about the story, and she was really kind of perturbed. She was irritated that she didn't get the chance to go have lunch and celebrate with her manager like her male counterparts did. And so my friend in HR talked to her and advised her to go back and have a conversation with her boss and talk to him about how that made her feel. And if there were, how they could maybe come to some kind of resolution on the matter. And so she did. She went in and approached her boss and told him about how that situation made her feel left out, and like she wasn't included in the circle, and she didn't get the same kind of access to him that her male coworkers did. And what was really great in the story is that the manager, he had no idea that his personal belief systems and his way of doing business was creating this inequity for her and those feelings in her. And so he was actually so moved by the conversation, so disappointed in himself that he had created this problem, that he was emotional about it, and so sorry about what he had caused, and that he caused her to feel that way. And so anyway, a really interesting story about how he was just unaware until she had the courage to go talk to him and bring it to him to help him be aware. And so it was uncomfortable for him to hear this feedback, but congratulations to him for listening to his employee and having that conversation. And and it takes people like her to have the courage to go back to her boss. She circled back with our friend in HR and said she wished she had done it sooner. Instead of picking up the phone and calling someone in HR and complaining about her manager, she wished she had just told him how she felt up front about it and taken that action. So that's a good lesson for all of us when we're in these situations.
Here's another story that illustrates how unconscious bias can leave someone feeling not included or even excluded. This story is about a well-educated and accomplished engineer who is well respected in their field of expertise. But what makes this story different is that this engineer is a Black woman. This engineer, who I'll call Sophia for today, had pre-registered for her annual statewide engineering conference. The conference was to begin on a Monday morning, so Sophia had decided to travel to the destination on Sunday. Like many of us would normally do when traveling on a weekend, Sophia had chosen to travel in comfort and arrived at the destination in shorts and a t-shirt. Upon arrival at the very expansive resort facility, she was anxious to check in for the conference, but had no idea where the conference registration would take place. So she went to the concierge desk, which was being attended by a young white woman. Sophia told the young woman that she was there for the engineering conference and asked where she could find the conference registration desk. The young woman responded with, "Are you sure you're looking for the engineering conference?" After Sophia assured the young lady that she was indeed there for the engineering conference, the young lady personally drove Sophia to the conference center about a mile away. The concierge graciously accompanied Sophia to the conference registration desk, which was being attended by an elderly white woman. When Sophia told the attendant that she was there to check in for the conference, the woman responded with, "You say you're here to check in for this conference? We're already shut down for the day." She then added, "Are you sure it's not another conference you're looking for?" Frustrated, Sophia reaffirmed her intentions to attend the engineering conference and gave the attendant her name and registration information. At that point, the concierge intervened on Sophia's behalf and said, "You should still be open for people to check in. It's only 4 p.m. and you should be open till 4:30. To which the attendant quipped, "How would you know?" After the concierge explained that she was the senior director of conference planning for the facility, the attendant apologized and proceeded to register Sophia. Unfortunately, the remainder of the conference brought more of the same treatment for Sophia. This is a classic case of unconscious bias, where one person after another was making judgments about Sophia solely on her outward appearance and their own preconceived views of what an engineer should look like. This reminds me so much of the video that we just watched, and the last statement in that video, if you remember, the last statement said, "A photograph is shaped more by the person behind the camera than what is in front of it." This is why it's so important that we understand our biases, both conscious and unconscious, because we tend to look for and see what our biases tell us we should see. And all too often, we fail to see what is actually in front of us.
So one more story, and this is another story from my company. We had a project manager who was working on a project. She had made a presentation to the city council a few years ago about the project, and then the project was put on hold and delayed for political reasons. They had a new mayor being elected, that kind of thing. And so when it was time to bring the project back to council, and the mayor was asking for a presentation now, and so the current city manager called up our project manager and said, "Hey, we want to bring this project back to council and do a presentation. However, I think the presentation would be better received if the presenter was older and male." And so our project manager, who is a female, she was shocked by the city manager's statement, and it shocked you even more. The city manager was actually a woman who was calling her and telling her that it should be an older white or an older male that should make the presentation. So she didn't know what to do. And so our project manager called her boss and had a conversation with her boss about it. Her boss said, "Well, you've got so-and-so in your office. He's not as familiar with the project, but he could do the presentation for you and get it done." So she hung up the phone. Wasn't exactly, the kind of support what she wanted to hear. But so she's pondering that. And then her boss called her back and said, "Wait, time out. I didn't handle that very well. And let's talk about this some more." And, that kind of request really isn't appropriate or acceptable. He said, why don't I'll drive out there, we'll go meet with the city manager and we'll talk about it and we'll come up with a resolution. And she said, our project manager told her boss, thank you, I appreciate you calling back, and I appreciate you offering to do that. I have a pretty good relationship with the city manager. Why don't I just call her and I'll talk to her about it and see if we can come up with a solution. So she did. She picked up the phone, called her client back, and said, "Hey, I don't agree with what you're asking. I think I'm the best one to make this presentation. I'm the most familiar with this project. What do you think?" And the city manager listened to her and frankly was embarrassed. She was embarrassed that she had made that request, and she apologized, said, "Absolutely, you're right. You're the best person to make this presentation." End of the day, by the time the presentation actually got scheduled, our project manager was out of town and not able to do the presentation. So her direct report ended up doing it all. But the lesson of the story here is that relationship, having conversation and being able to talk about it, is really the foundation. Having that relationship is foundational to be able to have the good dialogue in order to work these problems out. And you're much more likely to listen to somebody if they bring a concern like that to you, if you have a relationship with them and have a connection. So on this next slide, I wanted to share a quote with you from Brene Brown. Many of you may know her. She's a pretty prolific blogger and gets out a lot, has a lot of good stuff out there. I really like this quote because I think it's hard to hear maybe for many of us, but I think it's so true. It's just depending on where you're at, where you come from, and what your life looks like, if you are part of the majority of the dominant culture, and if we're talking about engineering or in our country, or whatever culture you're talking about, if you're part of that dominant culture, it's just that much harder for you to put yourself in someone else's shoes, and that's important to think about, to self-reflect on, and to understand. And it's important for us to kind of be observant with ourselves about these issues. So it's not to say that people who don't fit that dominant culture don't also have biases. Sure, they do. And we all have biases. And for instance, I'm a woman in a male-dominated field here in engineering, and I found myself. We were having this conversation about diversity with our NSPE board, and like Rick was talking about, when we were working on the strategic plan, and I found myself referring to the people in the room as old white men, and that's not fair. That was not helpful for me to say that, and certainly didn't help us in having kind of open dialogue in the conversation. So we all have biases, and we should want to do everything we can, everything in our power, to make those biases known to ourselves, so that we can be aware about them. I've heard lots of stories about engineering companies across our country starting diversity committees and having conversations on the subject. And many of these discussions allow people with different perspectives and different backgrounds to share their experiences and their perspectives. And the point is that you don't have to necessarily agree with everything they're saying, but if you start to see how things might look to them, then you're learning and you're growing yourself. So taking that time to talk to someone and hear their story can be very enriching for you personally and for your team. So that brings us to the discussion on best practices. This is not an exhaustive list, but hopefully will help spur some ideas for you and your organization. So step one here that we're going to talk about is to create the right practices, policies, and strategies to support diversity and inclusion within your organization. I believe that it's important that leadership at the top of your organization is involved in this conversation and is driving the effort. At NSPE, for us, that meant that our board of directors needed to fully buy in. We had to have the conversation and unanimously agree that it needed to be a part of our plan. And so when we formed that Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee that Rick talked about, our president, President Martini, asked me, I was our president-elect at the time, to chair the committee. And so I did. And our staff liaison was our executive director, which is pretty unheard of. He was not the executive director of any, or the staff liaison for any other committee, but he attended every single committee meeting we had and was fully engaged in that conversation. And we all mutually agreed that it was important that we showed leadership from the very top of our organization as we started on this journey. And so once you have the leadership established, you're going to want to develop a plan and identify milestones of where you'll measure progress along the way. And the first step of the plan will most likely involve defining what's acceptable versus what's good. And maybe more importantly, considering the shortage of available talent in our marketplace, and how competitive it is to retain our staff. What does exceptional look like? What would it look like to be an exceptional company or an exceptional organization in this area? There are lots of outside resources available to help your organization with the steps, so don't be shy about reaching out for help. Bringing in additional perspectives could be really valuable to you in this conversation. And so as you dig into your current policies, it's really critical that you get rid of bad behavior in your organization, especially if it resides in somebody in a leadership position. And that bad behavior can undermine all of your efforts in this area. So it's very important that you address that. So lastly, I want to touch on the last bullet on this slide, the subject of employee resource groups. Generally, these are groups that are formed on the basis of level of experience, race, gender, lifestyle, age. Many companies will start their DE&I journey by creating affinity groups where employees can find a place of belonging and make connections. If you choose to go this route, you're going to want to make sure that the groups are open to all individuals within your organization. And they might be formal or they might be formed in an ad hoc manner, but regardless of how that happens, if your organization supports one affinity group, they need to support all of them. And a good way to make sure that these groups are providing value to the organization is to focus them on problem solving related to your organization's goals and your strategic plan. You want to try to avoid whining sessions, right? And it seems like a lot of companies are maybe trending away now, and now that we're, kind of along this journey, we've been talking about this issue for a while out in kind of the mainstream. A lot of folks are maybe now trending more to opportunities to engage more broadly with diverse groups. But there might still be value for you in starting with this option and having the conversation. So another thing to think about is, and a lot of you work in smaller companies or, maybe have a small partnership and it doesn't make sense to have separate groups in your organization. So you might consider other organizations that are already established in our engineering community, and organizations like the National Society of Black Engineers. They have a professionals group, and the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, the Society of Women Engineers, and there are many others out there. So these organizations can be a great place for your employees to find support and mentoring and networking, and that will help build their confidence and improve their career and their job satisfaction. Next, let's talk a little bit about recruitment. And we hear all the time, well, how can I have a diverse workforce if the talent out there, if the people graduating from college isn't diverse? So in this first step, I think it's important to take a look at your recruitment strategies. When a candidate goes to your website, and when people are looking to apply for a job at your company and they go look at your website, are they seeing people that look like them? Is there diversity represented in the photos on your website? And this is important because we know that people will connect more quickly with people that look like them and that they're comfortable with. And so with engineers being in high demand and a tight labor market out there, we need to take advantage of this opportunity to make sure that we're attracting the best and the brightest to our organizations. So, so what if you're going out and recruiting at your local university, and it's majority white male, or you're not seeing the kind of diversity that you're looking for? What can you do then? Well, you might consider going to a university maybe that's a little further away, or maybe a little bit outside of your region. Or there's a lot of our historically Black university and colleges that have engineering programs, engineering technology programs, and that you might consider reaching out to and recruiting at to help broaden your talent pool that you're looking at. So the key here is balancing the need of filling the position with also the need to create a diverse and inclusive team. So to make this work, it's going to take your hiring managers and your company leadership, like we said, to be on board and to be focused on this issue long term. I want to share with you a graph here that shows the number of engineers. These are engineering students graduating with bachelor's degrees over the last decade. And you'll see here the big bar there are the white engineers, and the other colors, the orange and green and yellow represent some of the different diverse ethnic groups. So you can see that we're still majority white graduates, but the number of Latino engineering graduates has grown pretty significantly over the last decade, so that's promising. And also the line there going across the graph shows the number of women engineering graduates, so it's definitely increasing and has grown significantly over the last decade. So that's positive when we look at the face of the engineering profession for the future. So after we think about recruitment, we need to also consider retention, and this comes into the inclusion aspect of the diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation. So people join companies and organizations that are reflective of who they are, who they can connect with, but they stay because of the experience of the team that they're on. So it's really important that once you get folks into your organization, that you have a solid onboarding program that allows them to see that they're welcome and that their ideas are, that they're invited to the table with their ideas. So make sure you consider opportunities for folks to have access to managers and senior leaders. The equal access issue, like I mentioned in the story, somebody asked in the question, in the comment, well, how did that manager resolve it? Well, there's a lot of different ways that you could resolve that problem. And our manager in this particular case, he just invited somebody else to go to lunch with him. So it wasn't just him and the female employee. There were 3 of them. So problem solved. I mean, it's an easy solution, but again, until you recognize that you're creating that unequal access and creating that problem, you don't realize that there's an issue there. So on the next slide. Oh, sorry. Do that, Rick.
Thanks, Trish. Thanks. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how you can build up your organizational diversity and inclusion, build up your group data, and your own circles. One way to build up women and minorities within your organization is through mentoring. The data clearly shows that more women and minorities are graduating with engineering degrees, and most are being hired into the engineering positions. However, retaining and promoting these same groups, especially women in engineering, isn't happening at the same rate. Studies have shown that professionals with mentors are happier in the positions and make more money than those without. Studies also indicate that men tend to gravitate toward mentoring other men. So an effective solution could be for your company leadership to proactively engage in mentoring women and other minorities in leadership, but with leadership potential. When pairing mentors and mentees, think about their skill sets rather than their gender, race, or ethnicity. A pairing of complementary skill sets and personality can result in a more well-rounded relationship and a more meaningful mentee experience. Studies also show that women can be less likely to take risks. For example, when looking at job postings, men tend to apply when they meet about 60% of the criteria, while women, on the other hand, are inclined to not apply unless they meet 100% of the criteria. As leaders in your organization, you should encourage healthy risk-taking by highlighting success stories. Managers should be trained to treat failures as opportunities to learn rather than to humiliate or reprimand employees. Perfectionism should be discouraged as it can lead to burnout. But encourage women and minorities in your organization to get involved with professional organizations like NSPE. Their service may not only be rewarding, but can also help build their confidence and their networks. When building up your data, collect and review your diversity numbers. Where do you stand in terms of diversity of employees at all levels of your organization? Evaluate your leadership pipeline. Once again, balance the need to fill positions with building a diverse and inclusive team. Do you have a pipeline of well-qualified, motivated, and diverse employees that can be groomed for leadership positions? If not, why not? Gather qualitative data as well as quantitative data for a more complete story. It's not just about the diversity of your staff. Do all of your employees feel accepted and included for who they are? If not, why not? Remember, an organization can be diverse without being inclusive, and inclusion is key to employee satisfaction and retention. No one likes quotas or tokenization, so don't even go there. Identify women and minorities with leadership potential and mentor them, coach them, and encourage them. Develop a diverse candidate pool and let the best rise to the top. And lastly, a word of caution. If you collect data, you'll be expected to make good use of it and improve diversity and inclusion in your organization. Be prepared to address gaps or issues, or don't collect the data at all. Building up your circles is all about broadening your perspectives, developing empathy, and seeking to understand other points of view. Trish mentioned this a little while ago, but who do you follow on social media? Who do you listen to and who do you read? All these things influence how you think and behave. So shake it up. Read things, listen to things, and follow people or organizations that represent different points of view than yours. You might be surprised at what you learn. At the very least, you'll have more information to inform your thoughts and actions. Challenge your unconscious biases. Build relationships with people who are not like you. Stretch yourself. Educate yourself by having uncomfortable conversations. It's not always possible to walk a mile in someone else's shoes, but you can learn a lot by engaging in open and honest dialogue with someone who has traveled a different path than you. I'm a Hispanic engineer, and I've been associated with minority engineering firms for most of my career. But until recently, I never knew that I had engineering friends and colleagues that had been spat upon, belittled, shamed, ostracized, harassed, or otherwise mistreated simply because of their gender or their color of their skin. We can all benefit from building up our own circles.
So lastly, let's talk a little bit about ownership of your diversity and inclusion programs. So typically these programs are going to be housed out of your HR or talent development department. Rick, if you want to go to my next slide.
Cool.
There.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. So if you're a larger company, your HR department is gonna be the owner of it. However, it's, as I mentioned before, you really need leadership from the top and to be lockstep with HR and partnered on this to drive the initiatives within your company. And your managers, your frontline managers, have to be held accountable to to being engaged in the program. They should have goals, performance goals related to it, right? If you're setting goals for your organization, then it needs to be reflected in your managers' performance evaluations. So all of us should be responsible to model and advance our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. Like Rick mentioned the Maya Angelou quote at the beginning, now I do better. We all have to do better in order to affect change. So on this next slide, I want to go back to, we got a video from Jackie Bricks. Jackie is the chair of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee for this year, and she has a few words for you here.
I just really could use your help in really pushing forward in this area and really making an effort to go beyond what we have in the past. To really see, there's a gold mine out there. I should say a diamond mine. There's a diamond mine out there that hasn't been tapped. They're going to add multifaceted dimensions to your perspectives in your business, and you don't even know it yet. People come to me just to find out, am I missing something, Jackie? Because they know I think differently. You may need that too in your company. I challenge you to find out. Thank you. Bye-bye.
So before we close, just a few more thoughts from Dan Heath and the author of the book Upstream, from the story that Rick told at the beginning about the kids in the water. I thought these were kind of interesting and relevant to our conversation. He says, if you're going to work on these upstream problems, you need to pay attention to these three things. Number one, be patient for action. Be impatient for action, but patient for outcomes. It's going to take some time. For instance, if people always talk, if you buy a homeless person a meal today, you'll feel good immediately. But if you figure out how to reduce evictions in order to prevent people from becoming homeless, it might take much longer, but it'll have a much bigger impact. So we have to be impatient for things to change, but we have to be patient for the outcomes because it's just such a big issue in our culture. Number two, macro starts with micro. Upstream victories are won an inch at a time, and then a yard, and then a mile, and eventually you'll find yourself at the finish line. So you can't help 1,000 people if you don't understand one. So all of this work starts with the little actions that each of us takes. And then lastly, there's no magic pill for this. We're not going to solve the solution have a solution just like this. It's going to take some time, but we need to measure our performance along the way. We have to monitor our performance in real time and make sure that we're continuing along the journey. Don't obsess about finding the perfect solution and the perfect plan for your organization, but take ownership and start working on it now, and start the hard work and marching ahead now. Is this you, Rick?
No, that's you. The takeaways?
Oh, okay. Is it me? Okay. So sorry. As we close, we'll close with these last thoughts. Take some time for yourself to identify your own hidden biases, be aware, do some self-reflection, read some books, whatever you got to do to really dig in and understand where you come from, why you think the way you think, and kind of what's going on in your head. And then take that next step and start building some relationships with people that don't look like you. Get outside of your comfort zone and have those uncomfortable conversations, and take some responsibility for doing better in your own circles, and for having these conversations with your friends and your family, and put yourself out there and see what happens.
Okay, we're running to the wire now. So what I wanted to make sure that you guys knew, you should all get access to this presentation later. At the end of the presentation, we've got some additional resources that I think would be beneficial to you. And then we've also provided our contact information. Should you have any other questions that we can't get to today, feel free to reach out to us at any time. So, Trish, I mean, I've been kind of monitoring. One of the reasons I missed your slide a minute ago is because I was kind of monitoring the comments here, and I see a lot of great comments. I'm not seeing a whole lot of questions.
No, I think the only question I saw was the one about, what the manager did, and so I tried to answer that while we were talking. And I think, there's a lot of comments about, unconscious bias, and really that's the start to this. And I think you're right. I mean, I think there's some good reading lists out there, and if you're not a reader, there's some good documentaries on Netflix out there that you might go take a look at. A book I'm reading right now is called White Fragility. It's one you might want to look at. It talks about the systematic, issue we have here in our country, and kind of what the roots of that are and how it started, and it helps kind of give you an understanding of what a big problem it is. So that might be a good place to start if you're looking for some reading material.
Well, Steve, I see that we're coming up right at the hour right now. So I don't know if you have any closing comments, or if you'd like for us to stay on to answer any other questions that might come up.
Yeah, I was looking to see if anybody else had any questions for you guys. While we're waiting, give people another minute or so to see if they want to chime in. I just want to remind everybody again to go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/GSPENG, if you'd like to be kept apprised of these kinds of things in the future. And I just wanted to say that, at least in my opinion, this has been another great presentation to kind of wrap up the day. And from watching some of the comments and so on, I would say a rather thought-provoking presentation. So always good to wrap up the day with. See, there's some more. No questions yet. Also, of course, as you guys are both saying some thank yous and some good comments and so on, I certainly want to thank you on behalf of GSPE for taking time out of your day to do this for us. And yeah.
Well, thank
sorry,
you.
I was distracted by another one of the comments. Yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you all. We Rick and I, we obviously we love NSPE and love being a part of this organization, and we're so pleased to have the chance to spend some time with you guys today on a Friday afternoon. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and hopefully Philadelphia will actually happen in 2021, and I'll see you guys in person.
We would love that. Yes. Yeah. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, and good luck hiring our new CEO and executive director for NSPE as well. So I know you guys can't say much about it, but good luck.
Yes, exciting times.
Yep. All right, I think that's it. I'm not seeing any other questions. So once again, thank you, and I hope you both have a great weekend.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.